You look outside your window one morning and you find a number of enormous pods hovering above the ground, extending upwards through the clouds. They are still and imposing. You can imagine a scene like the movie Arrival 2016. The material that the pods are made out of is weird, sometimes shiny like metal, and sometimes a matte texture without reflection. Obviously, everyone is freaking out. Some people are packing up to leave the city. It's on the news. Some people think it's the second coming of Christ or some other prophet. Some believe it's the end of the world, and so on. At first, the army approaches the giant floating alien pods. The army with their pride and their macho masculinity. But after throwing everything they have at the pods, and the pods not even flinching, they sort of walk away with their tails between their legs. But the pods remain for long enough for people to get over their initial shock. After it has been recognized that the pods don't pose an immediate threat, a change of tactic is employed. The next faction or component of society to attempt to bridge that gap is those who perceive themselves to be in charge, such as the heads of government coalitions or the richest people. Gifts, performances, famous intellectuals, celebrities, authors, works of art are all presented with the desired outcome of catching our visitors' attention. Eventually, however, after all these attempts have failed, we start to use alternative approaches. You can imagine some fringe professions being put to the test. A therapist for special needs children, an animal whisperer, a hypnotist, or magician. Reality is best described as something that is being perceived by a perceiver, or something that is being performed for a perceived perceiver. We cannot have a meaningful reality without having two sides, producer and receiver. The very word meaning implies something in relation to something else. Sure, some entities can be particulates, but they are not the level of organization we are focused on. They are not organism or ecosystem or any system at all. An interaction between two individual people is a model of reality. When we interact with someone, we put something forward, a proposition, statement, question, explanation, narration, declaration, suggestion, affirmation, assertion, query, response. All of these things are put forward for some perceived perceiver. Reality exists as organic code, such as genes or DNA, putting forward a performance and the environment responding in return. The performance has its beginnings within some perceived source, such as the self. The performance is initially presented to our own conscious, inside our own head, in the realm of ideas. It then comes out into the present moment as a performance for others, other perceived selves. We are putting forward performances and also gauging the performances of ourselves and others. Reality is defined as an interaction. The scene of an arrival of aliens is used to pry apart the interaction, the daily interaction between people, and the fundamental interaction that describes reality. If we pry apart the interaction, we can follow carefully the intentionality from its source towards the common realm where it performs. We can see how the attention of the humans is first merely aimed at the aliens and then becomes more self-conscious as we learn to consider their intelligence to be superior to our own. If the interaction is between two unknowns, it reveals the spooky or mysterious nature of an interaction. Another way to think about the spooky or mysterious nature of our interactions is to generalize all of our daily interactions into a general feeling or experience. Life becomes more mysterious when you consider your general interaction with people jobs, hobbies. What is really interacting with what? In order to see the aspects of reality that matter, we need to focus our attention on the levels of organization that signify encapsulated systems. One example is the organism, which consists of a system of related component parts that all serve an assumed despot. I say assume because the only despot we can be sure about is our own self-conscious. Other examples are less certain but very there: a rock mineral, a society, an ecosystem, an organization. Anything that receives a name, i.e. named things, are levels of organization worthy of our consideration. All else is merely disconnected particulates. Disconnected particulates refer to component parts smaller than our level of focus, so they are joined to systems, but they don't provide meaning to us. All the components of a system must perform their assigned roles, and the system will work in harmony. Plato's famous conclusion of his search for justice is that justice is when all individuals of a society do what they should be doing. Similarly, justice in the mind involves all parts of our brain and our character to be working in harmony to serve the despot, which is our conscious self. When the aliens arrived, the army reacted first. It was then those who held power and eventually the fringe methods. Similarly, a person will first have their defenses raised in a new social environment and then will start to relax into it. The true artistic talent of the individual can come out if the individual is comfortable enough and motivated to do so. The true artistic genius comes out when the individual exercises some fringe or alternative methods. Both bridging the gap between us and the alien visitors and pushing the boundaries into a growth of our artistic performances are movements into an unknown space, approaching the mysterious. The focus on interaction or an interaction also exposes a type of existence or a state of being or a quality of reality. On the one hand, we have a state of being or a reality that seems to be more attached to the present moment, and on the other hand, we have a state of being that is more surrounding the present moment. These traits we can find in people help to expose reality as a unity that within itself exists as a spectrum spanning from initiation to present moment. By initiation, I mean the creation of influence or certitude or sense of self or sense of presence or whatever it may be. This influence collides with other influences in the present moment and contributes towards the economy of the day. Present moment is the confluence of all intentionalities. As individuals who differ from each other, we can find ourselves living in ways that lie on different positions of the spectrum to others. Some of us are very caught up in the present moment economy of the day. We are successful, we are important, we are part of the causal chain, we are a product of the system, and we make the system better. Others are more dreamy. While their bodies and jobs remain attached to the present moment, they prefer to live surrounding their present moment, caught up in the world of deep concepts, caught up in the world of rich experience, feelings, and emotions. The quick-tongued, shallow thinker is presented to the alien visitors in the hopes that he will impress them, but instead his dependence on his own system is revealed. He doesn't fare well in environments he hasn't grown up in. The quick-tongued, shallow thinker is a product of his environment. Take him out of his ecosystem and he loses his worth. The deep thinker, who is a poor communicator, however, is more comfortable dealing with the unknown and mysterious, and is more likely to be successful at bridging the gap with the alien visitors. Interactions imply a source in either direction. On the one side we assume the self, and on the other we assume that which is othered to the self. When we experience reality, our consciousness sits at the interface between the interaction of self and othered reality. But by sitting in this position, even self comes to us initially as othered reality. We have to pull it into our comprehensive structure in order to own it. We have to pull it into our consciousness. Therefore, the self remains mysterious because we don't know when it becomes our self. And the consciousness remains mysterious because we don't know what supports the consciousness. The consciousness is that intelligence that has come to know the self and has become the knowing self. Therefore, our consciousness is the self that has come to know and come to be known. It is the knowing self and the known self. To know the self is to bring the self into existence. Either sources, self and othered reality, are creators of influence or creators of reality. But the knowing personal consciousness that sits at the interface of the confluence is also a creator in that it is creating a reality at the confluence. The self can only be known by the consciousness when it interacts with the othered reality. It's almost as if an unknown self is performing for the known self or the knowing self. The organism in the ecosystem sits in the sweet spot in the physical realm, the horizon on Earth's crust that provided the ideal temperature for life to begin. The consciousness sits precisely in that sweet spot between the influence of the two sides, self and othered reality. The Aztecs looked into the distance and saw large houses floating on the sea, with enormous great sails of cloth rippling in the wind. With so much unknown and mystery, it must have been almost like peering into the realm of the gods. The Aztecs would have presented themselves with pride to the Spanish who had earned their respect. The Aztecs would have adorned themselves in gold and other jewelry and gathered their impressive army to receive the alien visitors. At the least, we want to earn our visitors' respect, but ultimately we want to earn their prolonged consideration. This still happens with governments today. Motorcades and military processions are performances, not necessarily aimed at a particular receiver, but aimed towards reality in general, a receiver in general, a performance both for the performers and any who will receive it. To perform for a received receiver, whether specific or general, is to care, the Heideggerian care. You admire your reality and your audience enough to want to perform well. Kierkegaard believed you must become committed to something in the real world in order to find meaning. Both Heideggerian care and Kierkegaardian commitment concern themselves with bridging the gap between self and that which receives the self. There are moments in our lives when we apprehend the transcendent. The transcendent is that unknown or mysterious that comes to be recognized in time as worthy of our consideration. At first it is unknown and goes amiss, outside our comprehension. It is then received as mystery. Mystery contains an essence of intrigue, as if we realize value, something worthy of our consideration. We notice something, we want to remember it, but it slips our mind. Then after some time we notice it again, and something about it is curious to us, but we can't quite put our finger on it. Some time goes by, and we notice it again, and this time the memory of the previous encounters is fresh in our mind. The two moments have joined seamlessly. This continues until the concept is comfortably possessed. As we come to learn a concept or recognize something worthy of our consideration, be it a person or work of art, it comes to us first in fleeting moments, because it is during these moments that we are not yet skilled enough or aware enough to notice it. Finally, when we do get it, when it does click, it stays with us almost like a state of being.